Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier, and thank you kindly for stopping by. I do appreciate it. I did an interview at Dr. Christian Turner's residence with Fiona Woolf, who's turned out to be, I learned from Wikipedia, of course, the 686th Lord Mayor of London. That interview was done on the 16th of September. It was about her visit to Africa and the ties between the Nairobi Securities Exchange and the London stock market and various other issues. So do have a look at that. And she was rather charming, I found, honest admit, and I took a photograph with her. So I'll put that up as well. We've got a number of videos coming up, and I apologize for the delay. It's Jacaranda season here in Africa, and I took this photograph looking up towards Westlands from the Capital Club, and I hope you can see the jacaranda of trees and blossom. And that took me back to Savo East at Christmas time, when there were these wonderful wild white flowers by the side of the road, and it was really a wonderful time we had down there. It's extremely, you really understand you're at the frontier when you're in Savo. And it's a spectacular landscape, and when you see something, it's just you typically seeing it. It's not like the Mara, where you'll find 50 cars surrounding you within a split second. If Scotland votes yes tomorrow, David Cameron will be the leader who lost the Union, and that is a brutal comment to write on anyone's political career, I'm afraid. And I think, as Salmon has said, that Cameron just never saw this as a likely outcome, and he completely miscalculated on that. And then really, Salmon comes out a winner either way. Devolution max, and he gets all these powers, or they break away. So I think, Salmon has won the game. He's been playing chess. Moving on, Islamic State video threatens to target the White House and US troops. Islamic State militants have threatened to target the White House and kill US troops in a new slickly made video response to Barack Obama's campaign to degrade and destroy the organization. The video, in the style of a blockbuster movie trailer for what is coming soon, depicts a masked man apparently about to shoot kneeling prisoners in the head. Towards the end of the clip, there is shaky footage of the White House filmed from a moving vehicle, suggesting the building is being scoped out for attack. It was released on Tuesday after US defense chiefs suggested that American troops could join Iraqi forces fighting ISIS, despite Obama's assurance that US soldiers would not be engaged in fighting on the ground. The video was released by the Al Hayat Media Center, ISIS's English language propaganda arm, and my goodness, aren't they 21st century in a bizarre and surreal way, of course, but they are using these platforms to amplify their message and targeting their audience in an extraordinary manner. It includes the now familiar high production hallmarks of an ISIS video, including super slow motion footage of jihadis in combat, jump cutting, and CGI explosions. Purports to be a trailer for the film entitled Flames of War, with the strapline "Fighting has just begun." Includes an image of the mission accomplished banner that was part of the backdrop to George Bush's infamous speech on an aircraft carrier after the 2003 US-led invasion of Iraq. And I'll put up two stills from that video that I found via The Guardian. And it took me back to that piece which I've referred to several times. One of the defining bifurcations of the future will be the conflict between information masters and information victims. That came from a US War College Quarterly of 1997. This is the US officer assigned to the Deputy Chief of Staff Intelligence, charged with defining the future of warfare, wrote, "One of the defining bifurcations of the future will be the conflict between information masters and information victims. This information warfare will not be couched in the rationale of geopolitics," the author suggests, "but it will be spawned, just like ISIS's digital content is spawned, like any Hollywood drama, out of raw emotions, hatred, jealousy, and greed, emotions rather than strategy. will set the terms of information warfare struggles, and I think they've obviously studied this fellow. And I continue to feel what I said in August, which is that the new normal is a very arrhythmic world. And in that piece, I said, the beheading of James Foley by a jihadist with a British accent went viral. Remember that word, viral. There was a spookiness about that accent which spoke to centuries of received history. IS and the likes of Al-Shabaab have proven accomplished, frightening and frightful exponents of the 21st century digital ecosystem. And what is so fascinating is that their media efforts all point west. The richest hunting ground for these new 21st century serial killers, terrorists, is among the disaffected in the Western world, and one of whom was Abdul Majid Abdul Bari El Jinny, lyricist Jinn, which of course is a play on the word jinn. He's one of those disaffected people, appealing to those disaffected people as well. He's a British Egyptian amateur rapper from West London, also known as lyricist Jinn and El Jinny. After circulation of video footage related to the decapitation of the American journalist James Foley, the British intelligence is reportedly centered on 3 suspects who might be the militant individual in the footage, dubbed Jihadi John. He's the son of a fellow who was assumed to have been involved in the embassy bombing here in Nairobi and Dar es Salaam. He's made a number of recordings: Overdose, Flying High, Dreamer, The Beginning, My Words. I'll put up an image of him that I found on the Times of Israel. And the reason I'm sort of speaking about this is I learnt overnight that there was a beheading plot was thwarted in Australia terrorism raids. Australian police thwarted an alleged Islamic plot to abduct and behead a member of the public as officers detained 15 people in the nation's largest ever anti-terrorism operation. Authorities carried out the pre-dawn raids in Sydney today after receiving intelligence that a senior Islamic State member was urging supporters in Australia to carry out demonstration killings, Prime Minister Tony Abbott told reporters. "We are at serious risk from a terrorist attack," Abbott said. "There are networks of people here in this country who, despite living here, despite enjoying the Australian way of life, they would do us harm." That's the intelligence we received, Abbott said. The group, of course, has released video showing the beheadings of 3 foreign hostages. My conclusions are, beheading is spreading like a contagion. And I'll put up an image of this fellow, El Jinny, lyricist Jinn. And then Al Jazeera was speaking about what is the spike behind Saudi beheadings, and that is a similitude of interest. Human rights group says there's been an upsurge of executions in Saudi Arabia. Charges have included murder, drug smuggling, and sorcery. How do you prove sorcery? Is a mystery to me. And then, as I was reading that, which is, I think, it's an older article, it said in May, a Saudi court sentenced to death prominent Shia cleric Nimr al-Nimr, who was arrested in July 2012. He's about 80 and he was shot up as he was arrested. There were some horrific pictures on the internet. The court convicted him of inciting violence in his speeches and supporting the unrest in the eastern province of Qatif, home to many of the kingdom's minority sect who say they face discrimination. Al-Nimr's defense counsel has appealed the sentence. Final ruling is expected on September the 16th, according to Al-Nimr's brother via Twitter. September 16th, if I'm not mistaken, was yesterday. And if they do behead this man, it's going to be absolute chaos. And I'll put up a photograph of a beheading in Saudi Arabia. And that connection, I think, informs us of a lot, and the ambiguity of this coalition against ISIS. Because I think NATO called it ambiguous warfare, and certainly ambiguous when those who have bankrolled ISIS are purportedly going to support their annihilation. Beyond that, of course, these are just pawns, the jihadists, though they might not realize it. The Saudi Grand Mufti and head of the council, Sheikh Abdul Aziz Al Sheikh, has said terrorists merited execution and their corpses displayed. As I said previously, the insurgency tail risk remains, and how it plays out will have an important consequence for ourselves here in Kenya because of the Al-Shabaab and Boko Haram, and will have consequences for the entire Africa Rising narrative and beyond that for the Middle East. Group of 20 IMF note meetings of G20 finance ministers and central bank governors. IMF note on global prospects and policy challenges. This is September 20th, 21st. IMF note ahead of that G20 meeting, talking of an uneven global recovery despite setbacks. Global growth in the first half of 2014 weaker than expected. Surprisingly soft first quarter in the United States, which you know about, and the US bouncing back from that softness, showing resilience and strength. Downward surprises in the euro area. Japan output contracted more than expected. Weaker activity in Russia, we know why. China, weaker than expected Q1, but they're saying authorities now supporting activity. Implied volatility measures fell to the very low levels prevailing before the May 2013 tapering remarks. This raises concerns that excessive risk-taking may be building up, which could sharply reverse in the run-up to US rate hikes, or should geopolitical events trigger higher risk aversion. I think that's an important comment, basically saying uncertainty levels set to increase. Looking forward, the global recovery should regain strength, but downside risks have risen. Exceptionally supportive financial conditions, moderating fiscal consolidation, strengthening balance sheets should support the recovery in the remainder of 2014 and into 2015. Heightened geopolitical tensions, sharp reversal of recent risk spread and volatility compression pose new risks to growth, while other downside risks remain, including those related to US monetary policy normalization challenges. And I think that's another key risk, US monetary policy normalization challenges. Notwithstanding what the Fed says, I think, if the US economy starts to really hum along, the Fed will be forced to hike much more quickly than the market, or they are currently anticipating, seemingly. I'll put up a link for Christine Lagarde's of the IMF, her Mindspeak session earlier this year, a photograph of herself and myself and Hannah. And Hannah said to her, as she gave her roses and said, "I want to be like you." And Christine Lagarde replied, "Work hard and you can be anything you want to be." And for that alone, I'm in her corner. Euro 128.60, softer, back below 129, quite a big fall. Dollar index 84.69, pressing right up against that congestion zone's limit, which is around this 84.75 level. Japanese yen 108.74. The dollar is at the strongest level since September the 8th, 2008. Swiss franc 0.9418, pound 162.62. Final batch of opinion polls before the referendum showed the no campaign remained in the lead by a slim margin. Aussie 0.8960, India rupee 6109, South Korean 110.4150. Rial 235.84. The Rial fell 1.1% to 235.79, biggest drop among 24 developing nation currencies tracked by Bloomberg. Egyptian pound 715.13, South African rand 1104.94. South African rand obviously is the proxy for risk, and people just tend to sell it reflexively. Dollar index 84.69. I'll put up a 3-month chart. We're now at levels unseen since the collapse of Lehman Brothers. Bloomberg's dollar spot index closed at its highest level since June 2010. The FOMC retained a commitment to keep interest rates near zero for a considerable time after winding down a bond purchase program under the quantitative easing stimulus strategy. It talked of a significant underutilization of labor resources, tapered monthly bond buying to $15 billion in their 7th consecutive $10 billion cut, staying on course to end the program in October. Expectations, odds the central bank will increase its benchmark interest rate target to at least 0.5% by July 2015 was 78%, up from 73%. That would be the first interest rate increase since 2006. And I think they're going to raise rates quicker because I think the market's going to force them to, because I think the recovery has got momentum. If things tip big, I said on the 25th of August, the dollar might soar. and indeed, I think I wasn't wrong. Euro dollar 128.60, that's softened up against sterling 162.62. I think it's a small trading buy, but that's a dangerous trade. That's not the control room at NORAD. It's a photo from last year of Alibaba's employees watching a live broadcast of transactions on Singles Day, which celebrates those without a significant other. Just have a look at the image. Commodity markets, gold 1223.55. My new target is 1150. Fell as much as 0.6% to 1216.30. That was the lowest since January the 2nd. Crude oil is trying to find a footing, $92.53. But have a look at this 1 month chart. You'll see we're trying to find a base here. Coming to Africa, Ebola economic impact already serious, could be catastrophic without swift response. This is the World Bank. Analysis of the Ebola epidemic released finds that if the virus continues to surge in the 3 worst affected countries, Guinea, Liberia and Sierra Leone, its economic impact could grow 8-fold, dealing a potentially catastrophic blow to the already fragile states. The analysis finds that the economic costs can be limited if swift national and international responses succeed in containing the epidemic and mitigating aversion behavior, a fear factor resulting from people's concerns about contagion, which is fueling the economic impact. Analysis estimates short-term impact on output to be 2.1 percentage points of GDP in Guinea, 3.4 percentage points in Liberia, and 3.3 percentage points in Sierra Leone. Translates to about $359 million in 2014 prices, which is material for these economies, which together are smaller than Afghanistan. The analysis finds that the largest economic effects of the crisis are not as a result of the direct costs, mortality, morbidity, caregiving. It's more about aversion behavior driven by fear of contagion. Analysis notes that behavioral effects have been responsible for as much as 80 to 90% of the total economic impact of the epidemics. Interesting article in Mail and Guardian Africa, who are putting out quite a lot of interesting, quirky content at times, saying a second look at Africa 2050, talking about Nigerians sending back huge amounts in terms of remittances, $21 billion, and looking at the demographic curve for Nigeria, estimating how much that's going to be. The current trends, 1 in every 4 people in the world in 2050 will be African, according to UNICEF. It's interesting. Projections show 37% of all children under 18 will be African by 2015. Talking about Apple, launched its iPhone 6. It's no secret that Sub-Saharan Africa barely registers a blip on the US-based firm's radar. But saying, now there are 73 million smartphones are expected to be shipped to Africa this year alone. Talking about smartphone revolution, internet, etc., and how big the consumer class is. It's an interesting piece, drawing together lots of stuff from various other research arms. The South African all shares up 10.6299% this year, but is at 3-week lows. Dollar Rand popped its head again over 11 at 11.0484 when I checked last, under pressure. Egyptian pound 7.1511, remarkably stable. Egyptian stock market bounced another 0.43%. It's up 41.182% this year, second only to Dar es Salaam. Nigeria all share is at 14-week lows and is down 1.451% year to date. Ghana Stock Exchange has been on the mend. That's up now 5.8275% and a 5.5-week high. Yum Brands says that Pizza Hut chain is returning to South Africa after a 6-year absence, with a new focus on delivery meals and a plan to use the country as a platform to enter other parts of the continent. Yum Brands owns fried chicken. KFC will use the huge infrastructure that was built to operate its 750 South African KFC outlets to expand Pizza Hut. In 2011, I wrote about the opening of the Kentucky Fried Chicken store at the Junction Mall here, and I said it made the bull case. I'll put up a photograph because the children insisted I queued, and the queued snaked around all everywhere. It was amazing. Nestle will invest around $200 million expanding its coffee factory in South Africa and revamping other facilities producing consumer goods. This is the incoming head of the local unit said on Wednesday. This is Ian Donald, my friend who was here. He's now gone back to South Africa, take over as chairman and CEO. Increased capacity of the coffee factory. Coffee factory would create an export hub for sub-Saharan Africa. Nestle has 9 factories in South Africa making consumer goods like baby milk powder, coffee cream and instant noodles. Donald said the company was looking at setting up manufacturing plants in several other African countries, including Ethiopia and Mozambique. Nestle, which make about 4% of its sales in Africa, could easily push that up to 10%, Donald told Reuters, without giving details. So ambitious. Other Times media surged nearly 5% yesterday as the South African media group flagged a near tenfold jump in full-year profits. Times Media runs South Africa's biggest weekly newspaper, the Sunday Times, expects headline earnings per share to increase by 870%. It sold everything from Financial Newswire, iNet, Bride and bookstore chain, Exclusive Books, New Metro Cinemas as it bulked up in broadcast media. The company said in the announcement that the results include profits and losses realized on the disposal of discontinued operations and a gain arising from a post-retirement medical aid liability. I met Andrew Bonamore at the Villa Rosa Kapinski. I'll put up a photograph of him speaking at that event that I attended. Very interesting, dynamic chap. And of course they bought into Kenya's Radio Africa. That was on the 14th of April when I wrote about that. I think they're a match well made, actually, Andrew and Patrick. And I'll put up a photograph of Patrick in his rather fancy new corner office. Interesting piece about Africa's most popular tourism destinations. Have a look at that diagram. According to Katrina at the FT, Somalia is to rewrite contracts in response to corruption concerns. Somalia is cancelling or renegotiating a series of high-profile contracts ranging from oil exploration to port operations as the country struggles to stave off donors' concerns about government corruption. The contract's 9 multi-million-dollar deals include a contentious agreement with Shulman Rogers, a US law firm, and an oil exploration deal with Soma Oil and Gas, a new UK company headed by the former leader of the Conservative Party, Michael Howard. Interestingly, I was looking at somebody who wanted to sell some of those shares last few weeks. The government in Mogadishu, which might have been a sensible trade to do, or to have done. The government in Mogadishu wants to rewrite or cancel the contracts following the advice of a new donor-backed committee. Very interesting piece in the FT. Of course, it has a subscriber wall, the FT, but I've been a bit cheeky and I've copied and pasted it. I won't do it again, I promise. I participated in an article by the Agence France Presse about Kenya's economy damaged but defiant a year after Westgate attack. It was a symbol for Kenya's growing well-heeled middle class, a vast supermarket crammed with flat-screen televisions, imported wines, chilled cabinets of cheese and meats. But in a burst of grenades and gunfire 1 year ago, when Islamist gunmen prowled the food aisles, executing at least 67 people in cold blood, the Nakumatt store in Nairobi's Westgate Mall would become the epicenter of one of the country's most brutal massacres. The attack, claimed by Al-Shabaab, heralded a tough year for Kenya's economy. 3 days after the terrorist attack, we had no Nakumatt there. We had lost everything, said Atul Shah, who's the MD of Nakumatt. Its outlet in Westgate, where 3 staff were killed, had been its flagship branch. Stock losses were estimated at $6.7 million. Business was slow for a couple of months. Everybody avoided shopping malls or public places, said Shah. He said the company has since started to recover, opening new stores. Westgate itself remains closed. Large parts collapsed during the siege. World Bank cut Kenya's growth forecast by 0.5% in June to 4.7%, citing security concerns and the impact of poor rains. More than anything, I said, the Westgate attack struck at the Africa rising emerging middle class narrative, the cheerleaders of the economy. These folks have moved from a very offensive game to one which is more defensive, post-Westgate, in my opinion. Subsequent attacks, especially killings in the coastal region, have badly dented Kenya's tourist industry. The negative spillover has been felt most intensely in coastal tourism, which is on its knees, and it's unlikely to bounce back meaningfully in the next 12 months, again, in my opinion. Since the Westgate attack, we've had a myriad of challenges in the tourism sector, especially along the Kenyan coast. This is Mohammed Hersi. We've basically become a closed shop. We've had an almost 40% drop, he said. However, coming to the stock market, shares in the NSE were snapped up when they debuted earlier this month, subscribed 6 times over. And I said Kenya's economy has in fact exhibited outstanding resilience post-Westgate. The Nairobi All Shares rallied more than 30% since that time, and that is a major signal. The Eurobond issue was massively oversubscribed. Mr. Shah left us with this note: "We will recover one day, and pray something like this will never happen again." The Kenya shilling is soft at 89.40. This is a fresh mid-December 2011 low, according to Reuters data. Obviously, it's having to battle with a much stronger dollar, and when you contextualize that the shilling is down 2.6%, and you look at some of the performances by other currencies, either you think the shilling is going to collapse and go and play catch up, or, like I do, that it's actually very resilient and it's going to try and hold in there as best as possible. But we are faced with a very strong dollar. The Nairobi All Share dropped as Safaricom went ex-dividend yesterday, eased 0.8677%, but it's had 2 record closes, Monday and Tuesday, then came off a record yesterday. NSE 20 closed above 5,200 again. This is for the second occasion this year, and the first time we've done that since a long time ago, 2007. I'll put up a photograph of Westgate, when that fire was raging. There's a link to my sort of very real-time thoughts around that time, reflections on Westgate. Samantha Luthwaite popped into that, and the White Widow. I wrote recently about the decapitation of Godane, about African insurgencies, and essentially that risk still remains. And then I'll put up that photograph I like of Westgate from 1,738 days ago, when the Christmas lights were on. Britam closed at a fresh record yesterday. It's up 112.87% this year. It's overcooked now, in my opinion. Centum closed at a record. That's up 101.51%. That's after delivering a triple-digit percentage gain last year as well. Kakuzi up at a record, up 113.79%. But most incredible of all is Kenya Orchards, which has rallied 1,158% this year. We've learned that a Nigerian firm is buying majority shares in Paynet Kenya. This is Interswitch, a Nigerian company coming to Kenya, looking to expand its footprint. Interesting article in Business Daily about base titanium lifting living standards in the South Coast. For years, Bakari Juma, resident of Maumba in Kwale County, has been selling mangoes and chickens to hotel establishments in Diani, a market that was saturated by other traders besides being affected by the usual low tourist seasons. Then late last year, a community buying centre was set up in a partnership between Africa Eco Safari, a catering firm, and Base Titanium, a mining company. Each Tuesday, residents sell their grocery to the caterer, who supplies food to people working at the mining site. Hotel owners are also invited to buy their supplies. Life has changed for us here because initially we did not have market for our produce, but every Tuesday I can go home with no less than 3,000 shillings, which is a big boost. Talking about Magaoni Health Centre also being put there. Simon Wall, who's a friend and the external affairs manager, says the company has spent more than 300 million shillings on the community over the past 3 years and has budgeted 348 million this financial year. Talking about having employed 2,200 people, talking about what they've extracted, expecting to earn 130 billion and pay the government 18 billion in tax and royalties during the life of the mine. They've created a best-of-breed facility and ecosystem in Kwale and are owed a lot of recognition, which I haven't been getting for this. I'll put up a photograph of Tim who's the CEO, with Jeff Tooth, who's the Australian ambassador friend, and then finally I'll leave you with an environmentally protected baobab tree, which sits on their mine site. It's pretty remarkable. The baobab tree, apparently the fruit of which is now the latest great new super fruit, I'm told. But I'll leave you.